again.
Hello.
Hola.
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 Bom dia.
Bom dia.
And buenos dias.
Buenos dias.
Okay, Spanish and Portuguese. Great. So let's continue on with our second region, which is the Andean West. So we'll only go through the first few so that we have time to look at some of the links that we have on cocaine production and smuggling, which we'll do later. Right now, let's look at Ecuador, Peru. We also have Bolivia and Paraguay, but we first like to look at what is the characteristics or the main characteristics of this region that make it special. Yes, it's the mountains. It's the Andes, the Andean West. So, in fact, there is something called triple zoning here. So we have those three unique zones. This zone known as the coast, this zone known as the Sierra, and this zone is known as the Oriente. Oriente meaning east, of course, and not, sometimes Orient gets taken with a connotation of meaning Asian, but Oriente is meaning east. So as we've said before with the Sierra Madre, same thing. So really it just means east in Spanish, and so this is Oriente. And in fact, the Sierra is the location where was the chosen spot for the native people, and we have that native culture heart of the Incas, which really isn't the earliest culture. The Incas say there were groups that came before them, so civilizations built in layers upon each other, and now archaeologists are uncovering more and more that there are in fact other more ancient civilizations below that. So the Incas, this region is really fascinating because the Incas have found things there that they say they are not sure they're mysteries because they were already there when they arrived. One of those is the Nazca Lines, which is found up in the high plains near Nazca in Peru, and these are visible from space. These are really huge. Some of them, they look almost like petroglyphs, the kind of things we would see in caves, only they're giant. They're miles across, and it could only have been done with visualization from space, really, because you can see them from, there weren't supposed to be flights taking off and coming in, but when people started flying the area with planes that were very high up, they could see these. And some of these are lines. They almost look like runways, like landing strips. So that's a fun thing to look up online, the Nazca Lines. And another really interesting place to go is in Peru, and this would be Machu Picchu. And this was a native construction area, beautiful, just terraced, and there were water features, and again, technology in building and architecture that just simply, they wonder how it was constructed because it was way before its time as far as how did they do it? Because even now, builders now look at it and they would be very challenged to build this same thing with the materials and the technology that we have today. So that's another mysterious place. In Machu Picchu, people like to take treks and pilgrimages to get there, but you need to go on donkeys or mules or horses or llamas. It's very mountainous, and there aren't roads to get there. So that's another interesting place. You can look up online too. So we have the triple zoning. Let's start with Ecuador. So in each one of these countries that we cover for the Andean West, there's going to be something to do with the zoning that's a little bit different. So we know that the Spanish did come here. This is the colonial Spanish area, and that the capital, the Incan capital, was taken. And so in general, there's colonial areas that are in the Andes, the Andean West. It's still very poor, but it's the most native of all of the regions of South America. Ecuador is 45% native people, I believe. In Peru, or I think Peru is 45%, and Bolivia is the highest in native population at 55%. But all of these still have high degree of native populations here. Now in Ecuador, the capital is more colonial, and the coast is more native and local, Guayaquil. It's hot and swampy in Guayaquil, yet highly productive area. A lot of things are grown here, bananas, and many things grown, produced. So this is a very high production area. And yet Quito, the area of Quito, which is far more colonial, controls the oil fields that are in the Orient here, just to the east of Quito. And so there's a lot of money resources in Quito, and a lot of wealth in Quito. If you look at the city, it's high-rise, very new, lots of new buildings, lots of financial resources are spent here. Whereas if you look at the coast, the buildings are very old, and it just has a very different flavor. Yet Guayaquil, I think, would be, I'd really like to go to Guayaquil. It looks like a lot of local flavor, a lot of culture there. So Ecuador, a very beautiful place. And yet there's that zoning. So in Peru, of course, the capital was, this was where the Spanish took Lima, which was the native capital, the Peruvian capital of the Incas. And this was the culture heart here for the native people. And so this was taken by, it's colonial, and yet the indigenous people don't have much say in their government. There's been attempts made to take more part in the government and get more representation of indigenous people there, and yet there hasn't been total success. Still, the president, is a higher class president that isn't quite representative of the native population there. So there's been attempts, not totally successful in Peru yet. Now Bolivia, that's a different story, where Evo Morales is a rock star in South America. He's the first indigenous president. And in fact, he shows up at many places. There's many events, soccer games. Soccer is very big. And he shows up in commercials, and very, very famous. And it's really, it's great that there's a local indigenous president, yet Bolivia remains divided. So there's this area of the Oriente, and then there's this area, and actually Sucre and Santa Cruz, which is the colonial capital, and La Paz, which would be the indigenous capital, it's really divided. So that is kind of sad that Bolivia remains divided, because Santa Cruz would like to break away and make their own state in some ways, and there's been attempts to break off from the rest of Bolivia. And then the majority of the population wants unity for Bolivia, which is what the president attempts to do, is have a unified Bolivia. So there's been a lot of success in Bolivia, and yet there's a lot of big challenges too in the divisions that remain. Well, thank you. We'll stop there for right now.